He was 32 years old the night the world forgot his name and remembered only his face. Malik Carter. A name like any other, one that carried laughter, rent receipts, love notes, and overdue bills. But the world doesn't ask your name before it decides who you are. Sometimes it decides for you. That evening, the air was heavy with summer heat, the kind that hangs between the day's noise and the night silence. Malik left work tired but calm, the kind of calm you earn from an honest day's labor. His palms were callous. His shirt still carried the scent of engine grease and dust. He hummed quietly as he drove home, windows cracked, the city lights streaking like gold over the hood of his old blue sedan. He thought about dinner, about calling his mother, about what his son had said last night. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to fix cars like you." He smiled, a small, private joy. But joy is fragile. It can shatter under red and blue. The lights appeared suddenly in his rear-view mirror. Two blinding colors twisting in the dark. A pulse of fear replaced his breath. It's strange how quickly the human body remembers. Even before the mind catches up, the hands freeze on the wheel. Even before the officer speaks, the heart starts explaining itself. He eased the car to the side of the road. The street was empty. No witnesses, no noise, no reason to stop him except the one he already knew too well. He'd done everything right. Seatbelt on. Speed limit steady. But in this country, right doesn't always mean safe. He whispered a prayer he didn't believe in. "Just let this go easy. Just let me get home." A figure approached the window. Malik lowered it slowly, his movements deliberate, practiced, because he had been taught that too much movement could be mistaken for a threat, and hesitation could be mistaken for guilt, license, and registration. The words were routine, but the tone was not. There was suspicion in the air, the kind that doesn't need reason, only repetition. He handed over his license, kept his eyes forward. He didn't ask why he was stopped. He didn't protest, because he knew that even silence could sound defiant in the wrong ears. The officer circled the car once. A flashlight beam sliced across the dashboard, over Malik's face, over the innocence of man just trying to get home. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time loses its shape when you're waiting for permission to exist. He thought about his son again, about the Little League game next weekend. He wondered if he'd make it there. When the second officer arrived, Malik knew the story was already written. 2 cars, 2 uniforms, 1 man. He felt the weight of it before anyone said a word. And in that moment, he realized fear wasn't the loudest part of this encounter. It was familiarity. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Every black man he knew carried this moment inside them, a memory of almost home, almost safe, almost free. They told him to step out of the car. He obeyed. They told him to keep his hands visible. He obeyed. They told him to turn around. He obeyed. And still, one hand reached for a holster. The world has a way of holding its breath in these seconds. A street lamp flickered. A dog barked somewhere far away. And Malik stood still enough to disappear. He wanted to ask what he'd done wrong, but he didn't, because he knew the answer didn't matter. Because wrongness had been assigned to him long before tonight, written in the lines of his skin, the texture of his voice, the way his presence filled a space he was invited into. When they searched the car, they found nothing. No weapon, no drugs, no reason. Just an exhausted man, an open glove box, a folded photo of his son. Still, they kept him there. Still, they wrote him a ticket. Still, they cuffed him, because resistance, they said, was in his eyes. And in that moment, under the hum of the streetlight, Malik Carter learned the oldest lesson in America. It isn't what you do that defines your guilt. It's what you are. He was released hours later. Bruised wrists, tired eyes, the word sorry never spoken. The night had taken something from him. Something invisible, but heavy. A trust he didn't even realize he'd been carrying. When he got home, the world was asleep. His mother's porch light was still on. She always left it that way when he worked late. A beacon of belief that her son would return. He stood there for a long time, looking at that light, trying to understand why it hurt to see something still shining when everything inside him had dimmed. He walked inside quietly, careful not to wake her. In the kitchen, the clock ticked with the precision of a world that didn't care. He washed his hands, as if water could erase memory, as if soap could undo suspicion. But when he looked at his reflection in the window, he saw someone else looking back, someone older, wearier, carrying the silence of 1,000 unspoken apologies. He sat down at the table and unfolded the ticket. The words were simple: failure to signal, resisting arrest. He almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter was the only thing that still made sense. It was absurd and familiar, the kind of absurdity that has rhythm, like a song that keeps repeating even after you stop listening. He closed his eyes and imagined a different night, one where the lights behind him were just another car, one where he made it home without a story, one where being seen didn't mean being targeted. But imagination was luxury now, and Malik couldn't afford it anymore. The morning after felt heavier than most. Sunlight crept across Malik's kitchen floor, pale and intrusive, like a truth he wasn't ready to face. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the red and blue again, flickering in his mind like a film he couldn't turn off. He got dressed quietly, his movements slow and deliberate, like a man piecing himself together one button at a time. The mirror by the door caught his reflection, the small bruise on his wrist, the faint shadows beneath his eyes. They would fade. They always did. But the memory behind them never would. At work, the world pretended nothing had happened. Engines roared. Wrenches clattered. The same playlist looped over the shop's radio. To his co-workers, Malik was the same. Quiet, steady, dependable. But inside, he felt like a ghost trapped between two worlds. The one that demanded he keep living, and the one that reminded him he could have died. He wanted to talk about it. But how do you explain to someone that fear can live in your skin? That even in safety, you're rehearsing survival? At lunch, his friend Tony noticed his silence. "You good, man?" he asked. Malik nodded. "Because that's what you say." "I'm good." The lie tasted metallic, like something rusted and necessary. He didn't tell Tony that when he drove to work that morning. He took a longer route, more lights, more traffic, less chance of being stopped again. He didn't say that he hesitated before every intersection, that his heart skipped each time he saw a patrol car parked on the side. He didn't have to. Tony already knew. Every black man he knew had a version of that drive. That night, Malik sat on his porch, watching the streetlights hum. His mother joined him, her step slow but sure. She didn't ask what happened. Mothers never need to. She just placed a cup of tea beside him and sat quietly. Minutes passed before she spoke. "I saw the lights last night," she said, "out on Jefferson." He didn't answer. "I prayed it wasn't you," she whispered. And for a moment, neither of them breathed. Finally, he said, "It was." She nodded, her eyes glassy but calm. "I know," she said. "I felt it." He wanted to tell her everything. How the officer looked at him like he was already guilty. How the air felt thick with accusation. How he tried to stay calm, but felt his humanity slipping through his fingers. But instead, he just said, "They let me go." She reached for his hand, her touch gentle, steady. "I'm glad you came home," she said. And then she said the words that made his chest tighten. "I don't know what I'd do if you didn't." They sat in silence. The kind of silence that holds both gratitude and grief. The kind that knows survival shouldn't have to feel like victory. When she went inside, Malik stayed. He looked up at the night sky, and for a moment, he wondered how many other mothers were sitting at windows right now, waiting for headlights that might never come. How many sons were learning to be careful instead of free. Days passed and the routine returned. Work, bills, phone calls, small talk. But the stop stayed with him, like an echo that refused to fade. At the shop, customers smiled, unaware of the quiet storm beneath his steady tone. At home, his son, Jordan, ran to him after school, clutching a drawing, a stick figure the two of them holding hands beside a car. Malik smiled and pinned it to the refrigerator. He didn't tell Jordan that he didn't drive after dark anymore. He didn't tell him that the car, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a cage with wheels. Sometimes, While Jordan played on the porch, Malik would sit nearby, pretending to read, but really just watching, memorizing the innocence that he knew the world would one day challenge. He thought about what it meant to raise a black boy in a place that feared him before it knew him. He thought about how his father used to say, "You gotta teach him early, how to survive, how to make himself small." And Malik hated that. He hated that the lesson of survival was taught before the lesson of joy. That night, he called his cousin Renee, who worked at a local advocacy group. He told her what happened. She sighed. Not surprised, just tired. The way people sound when anger has aged into endurance. "You should file a complaint," she said. He hesitated. "What's the point?" "Maybe none," she replied. "Maybe all of it." After they hung up, Malik sat with that thought. Maybe all of it. Maybe the point wasn't to win. Maybe it was to be seen. To speak, even if no one was listening. He opened his laptop and began to write. Not a complaint. Not yet. Just words. He wrote about the stop, the fear, the silence, the apology that never came. He wrote about the light in his mother's window and how it hurt to see it shining when he felt so dim inside. He wrote until the words felt like breathing. By the time he stopped, it was morning again, and for the first time in days, he felt something like peace. Not forgiveness, not yet, but peace in knowing his story belonged to him again. He saved the file and closed the computer. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after confession. Outside, the sky was turning gold, and the world looked softer than it had in a long time. But Malik knew softness was temporary. He also knew the system never slept. The ticket sat on his dresser, still folded, still accusing. He'd been told to appear in court the following week. Failure to signal. Resisting arrest. Words that could fit neatly into a police report, but never into the truth. He picked it up, stared at it, then tucked it into his wallet. A reminder, not of guilt, but of what it meant to live on the edge of presumption. He went to work, to life, to routine, but inside, something had shifted. He had seen an invisible thread that tied his story to countless others, and he knew one way or another he had to pull it. The courthouse smelled of dust and fluorescent light, the kind of place that swallows names and spits out case numbers. Malik sat in the back row, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. He watched people file in, faces blank, stories untold, lives paused between judgment and indifference. The clerk called his name, Carter Malik. He stood. His heart didn't race this time. It was slower, heavier. The officer from that night wasn't there. Of course not. Just paperwork. Boxes ticked. Signatures waiting for a name. The judge barely looked up. Failure to signal. Resisting arrest. A fine. A notation. A routine decision in a room built for repetition. But Malik wasn't routine. He was a man who had stood in the rain, hands trembling, heart cracking open under flashing lights. He was a man who'd been told he was lucky to go home, lucky to breathe, lucky. He wanted to stand and say, luck should not be a measure of my survival. But the word stayed inside him, trapped behind the etiquette of silence. When it was over, he stepped outside into the daylight. It felt wrong that the sun still shone so easily. The city moved as if nothing had happened. People laughed. Cars honked. The world continued. He walked past a mural. Bright colors, faces of protest and pride. Beneath them, words painted in fading white. We are still here. He stopped for a long time. Something in those words reached into him, a reminder that presence itself was resistance. That night, he returned to his writing. Only this time, the words came like a flood. He wrote about how justice could feel both near and unreachable. He wrote about fear dressed as law. He wrote about the moment you realize you are seen not as a man, but as a possibility of threat. And then he wrote about his son. He wrote about Jordan's laughter, his drawings, the way he believed the world was fair. He wrote because he wanted to build something for his son that the system couldn't erase. A truth, a record, a voice. Days turned into weeks. The story spread quietly, shared by Renee's group, posted online, reshared by strangers. It wasn't just Malik's story anymore. It became a chorus of recognition. Comments appeared beneath his post. This happened to my brother. I thought I was alone. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Malik didn't respond to most of them. He just read, listened. Every story felt like a reflection, different faces, same fear. He began attending meetings with Renee. Community circles, small gatherings in church basements, libraries, parks. He didn't speak at first, just watched. Mothers holding photos of sons, men telling stories that start the same way. It was just a stop, and slowly, Malik found himself talking. Not loud, not rehearsed, but honest. Each time, his voice grew steadier, his words clearer. He wasn't looking for pity. He was naming something real, something stolen. By the fifth meeting, people were listening to him. He could see it. The nods, the tears, the quiet hums of understanding. He began to believe that telling the truth, even into an uncaring world, was a kind of freedom. Still, at night, when the house went quiet, the memory returned. The lights, the command, the trembling. It lived inside him, a scar without a wound. And yet, he got up each morning, poured his coffee, and kept going, because that's what survival looked like. One afternoon, while driving home, Malik saw a young man pulled over on the same stretch of road. 2 officers stood behind the car, one hand near a holster. Malik slowed down. His chest tightened. He wanted to stop, to watch, to protect, but he knew the danger in that, too. So he pulled over at a distance, his phone in hand, filming silently from afar. He didn't want to go viral. He wanted the boy to go home. When the car finally pulled away and the lights dimmed, Malik exhaled, a breath that felt like release and exhaustion all at once. That night, he added another page to his story. He wrote, "We have to keep bearing witness, even when the world refuses to look." He didn't know who he was writing to anymore, maybe his son, maybe himself, maybe anyone who might need it one day. But he kept writing. Months passed. Change, as always, came slowly. There were protests, petitions, promises. The officer from Malik's stop was reassigned, not fired, not disciplined, just moved. The report stayed sealed. And Malik learned that injustice didn't end. It simply adapted. But so did he. His story became part of a larger documentary project about racial profiling, narrated by unseen voices, like prayers carried by wind. He agreed to let them use his words, but not his face. "I'm tired of being looked at," he said. "Let them hear us instead." When the documentary aired, his voice trembled through speakers across the city. People listened, some with empathy, some with discomfort. For Malik, that was enough, because even discomfort meant someone was finally feeling something. That night, Jordan sat beside him, eyes wide. "Dad," he said softly, "that was your voice." Malik smiled. "Yeah. Are you a hero?" He paused, looked at his son's face, so full of belief. "No," he said. "I'm just someone who didn't stay quiet." Jordan nodded, and Malik thought maybe that was enough, too. But life rarely ends neatly. 2 months later, on a humid summer night, Malik drove home again. The same route, the same stretch of road. Only this time, it was his son's drawing that lay on the passenger seat. The lights flashed again. Blue, red. He pulled over, heart calm, face composed. The officer approached. Different man, same script, license and registration. Malik handed them over, slow, deliberate, practiced. The officer squinted at him. "Where you headed?" "Home," Malik replied. Something shifted in the air, a tension familiar and ancient. He kept his hands visible, his breathing even. He'd done everything right. But justice doesn't always need a reason to fail. Later, the headlines would read, "Man found unresponsive during traffic stop." They'd say he resisted. They'd say the officers acted appropriately. They'd say investigation pending. The system would close around the truth, like concrete. Renee would cry. His mother would sit in silence, staring at the porch where they once shared tea. Jordan would grow up remembering his father's voice, not his face. And somewhere, in the cloud of digital echoes, Malik's story would live on. His words repeated, reshared, reframed, We have to keep bearing witness, even when the world refuses to look. And in that, perhaps, there was redemption, because Malik Carter became more than a man. He became a memory, a mirror, a question the world could no longer ignore. Not every story ends in triumph, but sometimes tragedy is what teaches us to listen. And when we listen, truly listen, maybe that's where justice begins. Click on the video link to watch the next episode. Don't forget to like the video, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. See you on the next one.